Administrator Green, thank you for being here. Thank you for taking time to visit with me in my office yesterday. And thank you for your leadership in working to make the world a better place. General John Allen, who was a former commander of U.S. forces in Afghanistan, I've kept his quote around to remind myself, and he said this: "In many respects, USAID's efforts can do as much over the long term to prevent conflict as the deterrent effect of a carrier strike group or a Marine expeditionary force." It brings me to the importance of food aid. Can you tell us about how the essential programs like Food for Peace, Feed the Future, and the Dole McGovern programs are, how important they are to the stability of developing societies, to the well-being of our own country, and is now an appropriate time to cut funding to those programs?
Senator, I appreciated the chance that we had to talk about the importance of these programs. And as I mentioned to you, food security and the food security tools that we have did not exist when I served as ambassador, to my great regret, quite frankly, in Africa. I think our food assistance, from obviously that we provide on a humanitarian basis to, I would argue, even more importantly, what we do in terms of food security investments on the development side, is one of the true highlights of American foreign policy and development policy. This is an area in which America's pretty good. American agribusiness leads the world in what it's able to provide. And so when we're able to share this technology and help spread these investments, we help countries deal with, and Senator Leahy brought up the issue of climate change, but we help them deal with resilience issues, from drought to the fallout from changing climate and natural disasters. So this is some of the most important work that we do. With the funding for Feed the Future, we continue to focus on our target countries, the 12 countries that were determined according to the criteria under the Global Food Security Act. And we think these are the countries that, in which we can make the greatest difference, and so that's where our focus is. But also, the investments that we've made in recent years continue, and we continue to get the benefits of those. So even though we've had to balance, obviously, funding for these programs with fiscal needs here at home, I'm confident that we will continue to lead in the food security field.
Administrator, I certainly care about both the development and humanitarian side of our efforts in regard to food aid. I have carried with me a photograph that I took in Kansas more than a year ago. It's no different today than it was then, with grain piled as high as you can see up to a local grain elevator in the absence of markets. And I would highlight for you, as I've done for the Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, the opportunity that we have not only to feed the world, but to utilize grain that is otherwise sitting on the ground in Kansas and across the country. Our farmers desperately need markets, and grain desperately needs to be consumed, and we have famines ongoing around the globe, and it seems to me we ought to be able to bring these two things together. In a different vein, I appreciate how seriously you take China's efforts to extend its influence through its Belt and Road Initiative. In our conversation, you exhibited a significant amount of passion toward this topic. Would you talk about China's practices and what we need to do as the United States of America to counter them?
Thank you, Senator. You're right. This is a cause that is important to me personally, and I think is important for the United States in the world these days. First off, I don't like to use the term great power competition that some use, because it almost implies that we're on a playing field, playing by the same set of rules, seeking the same outcome, and that's simply not true. We do foreign assistance, they do predatory financing, quite frankly. And so I think the striking differences between the two models of engagement in the world is something that we should not shy away from talking about over and over and over again. I had, for example, a conversation I had with some American businesses working in Central America, and they said, you know, you all talk about Chinese assistance, we call it loan to own. They provide money and they know they're not going to get paid back. They're simply going to get assets surrendered to them. Also, secondly, the tools that we use. So we try to bring the strength of private enterprise to our investments. The Chinese model brings Chinese business, which is often a wolf in sheep's clothing, harvesting data and collecting data for their own purposes and interests. Also, quite frankly, China talks about how its overriding policy is non-interference. And my argument is that when they use in a place like Venezuela technology that they honed and sharpened in Tiananmen Square, that isn't non-interference, that is interference on behalf of the dictators and against everyday citizens. What we offer is a taste of the American dream. We offer opportunity. We offer self-reliance. We help countries lead themselves, and we need to talk about it over and over and over again. If we get caught up in a numbers discussion or a financial arms race in terms of dollars, I think it's a mistake because we're playing by different sets of rules and have different purposes. We want to help countries lead themselves, and we should talk about it over and over and over again. We want to liberate the coming generations in places like Africa to be able to provide for themselves and grab a taste of what it is that you and I have here. And so, yeah, I am passionate about it, and I think it should be at the heart of our policy.
That's a great answer. Senator Merkley.